When a 7-year-old girl walked slowly toward the center of a national television audition stage, no one in the studio was prepared for what was about to happen next. Her appearance seemed completely ordinary: a little child in a simple white dress, long hair flowing naturally, and a sweet, innocent smile typical of any kid her age. But the moment she took a deep breath, opened her mouth, and let out the first note, the entire atmosphere in the room instantly turned cold and gripping. The sound echoing from that tiny throat was not the cheerful, light, or high-pitched voice usually heard on talent shows. That note carried an incredibly heavy, raspy, thick texture, burdened with a massive emotional weight. It was the kind of voice from a soul that seemed to have lived for an entire century, harboring memories of pain, loss, and tears that made absolutely no sense coming from a child who hadn't even finished elementary school. The audience froze in their seats, and the judges exchanged bewildered looks, their faces a mix of pure disbelief and goosebumps, realizing they weren't just watching a talented kid. They were witnessing a vocal phenomenon that felt almost mystical, magical, and slightly unsettling. How could a little girl who had never known the harsh realities of life learn to weep and mourn through music so perfectly? That massive question hanging in the air instantly brought our collective memory back to the dark pages of jazz history that had been buried for decades. For her first performance, which immediately exploded and went viral across the globe, this young girl didn't choose a modern pop hit or a cheerful tune to please the masses. Instead, she made a highly risky decision by selecting a legendary composition avoided by many seasoned musicians, titled Gloomy Sunday. This song is no ordinary musical piece. In the 1930s, it was strictly banned from various international radio stations due to its dark and terrifying reputation. Its melody and lyrics were accused of possessing a psychological grip so intense that it drove dozens of listeners into deep depression, leading them to make the extreme choice to themselves. The legendary artist who popularized that cursed song with such heartbreaking delivery was none other than Billie Holiday, the tragic queen of jazz whose own life was plagued by suffering. From the very first second that 7-year-old girl sang Gloomy Sunday, music critics worldwide noticed a shocking technical similarity. She wasn't just memorizing lyrics, she was naturally mimicking Billie Holiday's signature lazy phrasing, a high-level vocal technique where the singer intentionally drags and holds words slightly behind the beat, creating a profound effect of frustration, emptiness, and despair. The uncanny ability to capture the essence of pure agony found in Lady Day's vocals is something impossible to achieve without traumatic life experiences or decades of technical training. This phenomenon led the public to speculate that perhaps another force was working through her vocal cords. Yet, the mystery surrounding her was only beginning. As viewers around the world began analyzing every detail of her performance through video recordings watched millions of times, another visual anomaly became crystal clear on the screen. On every major stage she stepped on, from grand concert halls in Europe to massive venues in the United States and international festivals, Jordan always performed completely barefoot. She stood on those cold stages with fragile, bare feet. At first, many industry insiders assumed this was merely a marketing tactic or a visual gimmick engineered by television producers to make her look eccentric, dramatic, and memorable to the public. However, when the truth behind her decision to go barefoot was finally revealed, the real story turned out to be far more emotional and heartbreaking than anyone could have imagined. Years before her name became known to the world, while traveling with her family in a developing nation in Asia, she encountered a young, orphan street child shivering from hunger on a dirty road. The child had no proper clothing and her feet were badly injured from walking bare on the scorching asphalt. Without a second thought, Young immediately took off her own favorite shoes and gave them to the street child. On that cold night, she looked up at the sky and made a sacred vow to herself. She swore she would never wear footwear on any stage of honor again, serving as a sign of respect, empathy, and a permanent reminder of the suffering of millions of underprivileged people out there. This profound emotional intelligence proved she possessed a sensitivity equal to the old blues masters, an emotional depth that would eventually fuel her technical vocals to a much higher, more complex, and more sophisticated level. As time went on, alongside her physical growth and maturity, the musical influences within this young singer underwent an extraordinary evolution. While the early days of her career were spent almost entirely absorbing the darkness, fragility, and deep sorrow of Billie Holiday's style, she later opened up and integrated a highly contrasting element into her vocal architecture. She began studying the complex, mathematical precision and luxurious vocal mechanics of Ella, the First Lady of Song. This massive shift in technical maturity became undeniable during a brilliant international performance of the classic standard Summertime. On that stage, audiences were no longer just listening to a sad lament with short, broken notes. She began flaunting flawless pitch control, incredibly smooth note transitions, and a vast vocal range without a single blemish. She successfully adopted Ella's legendary capability for scat singing, an improvisational vocal technique using wordless syllables sung at rapid speeds to mimic jazz brass instruments like trumpets or saxophones. This fusion of two opposite poles of jazz created a new vocal style that is incredibly rare in the 21st century. Her voice carried the raspy, intimate and dark emotional texture of Billie Holiday, while simultaneously driven by an engineering engine that was incredibly precise, accurate and stable like Ella. However, in a modern world driven by instant gratification, trying to maintain the idealism of a golden era and refusing to bow to market trends is a dangerous choice full of bitter consequences. The tension brewing behind the glamorous curtains of the music industry finally erupted into an open conflict, triggering rampant speculation among fans and international media alike. In early 2025, a massive controversy shocked the public when her name suddenly and mysteriously vanished from the finalist roster of Norway's most prestigious song contest, Grand, the main gateway to Europe's largest competition. The abrupt withdrawal, occurring just hours before a major promotional and dress rehearsal, left everyone stunned and sparked wild conspiracy theories. Her US-based legal team took swift action, releasing a vague official statement citing serious security concerns and personal threats at the venue as the sole reasons for pulling the artist from the competition. The backstage situation escalated even further when the national broadcaster hosting the event felt and publicly humiliated. They didn't stay quiet. They immediately launched a massive financial lawsuit against management, claiming they had spent thousands of dollars preparing an exclusive designer gown and a high-budget stage setup that went completely to waste due to the sudden cancellation. Rumors circulating among industry insiders suggested that this conflict was actually triggered by heavy pressure from conventional music executives, who were frustrated by their inability to dictate, control, and alter vintage style into a commercial pop formula that sells easily in today's market. The industry was beginning to show its sharp teeth, trying to force the vocal prodigy to her knees and make her submit to ruthless corporate rules. And what happened next shocked music analysts to their core. Instead of surrendering to the daunting legal pressure from a massive TV network or choosing the safe path by signing a long-term contract with a giant record label ready to rewrite her musical identity for profit, the young woman chose a fierce and radical rebellion. She made the extreme choice to completely sever ties with the conventional label system and go entirely independent without any corporate backing. Under the strict protection and guidance of her family, particularly her idealist poet grandmother, they began mapping out an aggressive and structured artistic counter-strategy. This bold move culminated in 2026 with the release of an incredibly ambitious and grand independent album trilogy titled Secret of. The entire production process of the album was done independently, completely free from the interference of major label executive producers, who usually love to cut, manipulate, or polish an artist's raw voice using auto-tune technology, so it sounds uniform and radio-friendly for the commercial market. Within this independent trilogy, she freely poured out dark, heavy, and philosophical poetic lyrics, accompanied by grand, organic jazz arrangements played by legendary musicians. This courageous decision proved to be a resounding international victory, proving to the world that quality music carrying the soul of a golden era never needs validation or permission from corporate executives to achieve financial success and high critical acclaim. Ultimately, this career journey filled with drama, intrigue, and sharp turns managed to save her life from the horrific curse that usually destroys child stars worldwide. Entertainment history has documented far too many prodigies who lost their way, suffered severe mental breakdowns, or fell into the trap of substance abuse, tragically ending up because they couldn't withstand the weight of fame and industry exploitation from a tender age. However, by anchoring her soul to the eternal legacy, dedication, and honor of Billie Holiday and Ella, the Barefoot singer successfully built an artistic and mental fortress capable of weathering the modern industry's storms. She never positioned herself as a cheap imitator looking for instant popularity from the past. She is a historical curator, a medium between eras reviving a high art form that time had written off as dead, bringing it back to a new generation in a dignified, authoritative, and financially independent way. Her success in preserving pure musical integrity ultimately forces all of us to pause, look back, and ponder a deeply haunting question. Is the incredible talent within this young woman simply the result of rigorous vocal training since childhood, or are there certain sacred voices in the universe that refuse to die, refuse to be forgotten, and intentionally choose a specific vessel to be reborn into the world, just to remind humanity of true beauty?